get started. So this is inspection readiness, specifically looking at BIMO requirements for the sponsors and the CRO. So we'll go through the inspection process and we will talk about how sponsors and CROs, again, I understand you're with the sponsor side, so we'll keep. So really briefly, my name is Shana Zink, and I've been in the research arena for my entire career, both pharma and medical device. And I won't spend too much time. If you want to see a little bit more about me, you can go peek at my LinkedIn profile. What I will tell you is relevant to this course is I have been in inspections, in FDA inspections, other regulatory body inspections. I did spend 15 years of my career in the quality assurance arena, so not just from the clinical side, also, you know, as kind of that frontline interaction with the FDA. So I do have, you know, some direct experience with that if you have questions about, you know, the logistics or anything really specific about how the process works. So what we're going to cover today is we're going to look at how the FDA BIMO program is used in inspections. So actually getting into the FDA's process. So it is, you know, very important to understand how the FDA approaches these inspections, and the more we know, the more we prepare, the less fear there is when we're prepared about what's going to happen. And the good news about this, depending on how much you know about the BIMO program, it's all available for us out on the FDA website, and we're going to share the exact FDA documents that the FDA uses and their inspection process that they use to do the inspections, to prepare the inspections. So we actually can have a lot of insight to what is going to happen, and when we have that information, then the more prepared we can be. We're also going to look at the most common types of inspection findings for sponsors, CROs, and investigators. So again, this is a little piece of where we'll cover all of the pieces that are relevant to the work that we do in clinical operations. And so again, why this is so helpful is when we know what the FDA is focused on, when we know where others are having problems, their type of inspection findings, that can give us a lot of information about where we should focus our preparation, you know, to be ready for the FDA. So that can be very helpful to understand what that information is and how to find it. And then the last thing is to look at how the BIMO can aid in preparation for an inspection prior, during, and at the completion of a clinical trial. So, of course, you know, the key to success really is preparation, and we want to use this BIMO program from the very beginning of our clinical studies, quite frankly, from the very beginning before we're even putting our SOPs and our protocols and our other plans in place. And they are a great, it's a great program, great document to help us focus our efforts. So we are not, again, scrambling at the end, which we will be scrambling enough when we know an inspection is pending. So we want to figure out how to get this information and, again, be very proactive in its use. Okay, what should preparations when should FDA preparations occur? So we already talked about this a little bit, but I'll just kind of re-summarize what, you know, what we said already, which is that, you know, ideally we are preparing for FDA inspections really before we ever even run a clinical study. So as we are, you know, putting our processes, our quality system into place, we're going to start thinking about that end game, that we are going to be submitting to the FDA, that they're going to come inspect us, they're going to come inspecting our site. So we want to put our processes, our procedures in place from the beginning that are going to support the regulations and the expectations of the FDA. So if that hasn't happened, then we want to do it at the beginning of a study, correct? You know, so maybe we're a small startup company and we're running our first clinical study on our first product, and we kind of jump into the gate. So then we want to think about this, you know, before we have started initiating our first sites, enrolling our first subjects. Again, proactive is really the key here. The reality is that hopefully we are doing this, but we're also going to spend a lot of time preparing once we have submitted and once we know the FDA is going to be coming. So again, it should be throughout its entire life cycle, throughout the entire organization, clinical organization, and it doesn't just hit the clinical organization, of course, but we want to stay on top of this the entire time. There is a saying that you can't build quality into the end, and that is where sites, sponsors, CROs sometimes get into trouble. Understandably, we're moving so fast, so I do understand how this happens, but we start thinking about preparations for an FDA inspection a little bit too late, and it's really hard to get in front of that and be fully prepared. And we'll look at a few warning letters, and if you look at a few warning letters, a lot of times you can tell it's because they didn't have an understanding of the requirements prior to starting their studies or putting their processes in place. So what are some aids in inspection preparation? So some questions, you know, to ask you for yourself and your sponsor company is, did you consider the FDA's BIMO available when you were developing your SOPs, procedures, and processes? So were you aware? Did you look at the BIMO? Did you look at the regulations as they were, as you were writing your system? So that's a question for you to kind of consider as you guys are preparing, is how much did you take into account the BIMO when you were writing your processes and procedures? Then the second piece is, did you train members on the FDA BIMO? So again, we do a lot of inspection preparation, a lot of inspection readiness training when we know that the FDA is imminent, but we really, again, want to start that. We want to make this as part of the training process. So I always say for our investigators as well, are we introducing the BIMO, their inspection manual when we are initiating sites? You know, are we sharing this information with them? Are we using it as we are monitoring and overseeing the investigators to make sure that all along the way our monitoring includes pieces of the BIMO? Again, that's all part of the preparation and making sure we're all doing the right things. You know, have you actually read the BIMO, you and your team members, to understand what the FDA is expected in the conduct of clinical trials? Again, whether it's proactively or, you know, after today or before today, are you and your team members really looking at this guidance manual and reading it in detail so you have a full understanding? So I already mentioned training our sites at the beginning of a study, getting the word out on the BIMO and how sites can read to better understand FDA inspections. And again, the message here is the further, you know, from in the front end that we are planning and learning, the less rework there's going to be, the less fear there's going to be, the more prepared we're going to be, which of course can only lead to theoretically a much better inspection, which of course is what we're all going for.